This unusual case uses a Crossflow fan, which we last saw in the Meshless AIO mini ITX case. So this mounts up front, and it provides a sort of laminar flow of air across the inner wall, the inner glass wall of the case, behind this weirdly fabric panel. And the case is, it's an amalgamation of unique things that don't work well. It's one of the worst cases we've ever tested for thermals, but it's interesting. So this is the Tryx Flova F50. It's a $150 MSRP case with the novelty transverse fan. We previously made this animation of how Crossflow fans work, but the short version is that these solutions are transverse or tangential fans that divide the fan cylinder into blocks separated by joint discs, which are constructed of cross-sectional curved blades. So there's a drum rotor for power, and rather than using an axial fan that slices air and scoops it, a crossflow fan rotates longitudinally and brings the air in perpendicularly to the rotational axis. These fans are typically used when designers want a constant laminar airstream without the buffeting effect of larger axial fans. We even tested these with our Schlieren imaging setup previously, showing how they project air in more of a column. We'll also be using our fan tester for this content, where we set up a unique test with a custom-made plate to mount the Crossflow fan to our fan testing machine. So we'll look at some of that data at the end of this review. We've also used this machine recently for the Haven BF360 review and the Antec Noctua collaboration on the Flux Pro. The result is a lower velocity air movement and a more laminar flow along the blade of the fan that's in here. And so as far as what that does in the case, that is going to look like this fan here. So this is mounted up front. You can see the outlet is there, and it's actually bringing the air in through this panel here. But because this isn't pushed all the way against this panel, there is a risk of some recirculation from the GPU, which sprays air basically everywhere, especially right up against this glass panel. Some of that might get sucked back in, and that's going to be a lot of the problem that we run into in the testing today for this case. But also, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to feed air so vertically when you've really only got two focused areas you want the air for the GPU and the CPU. These can work. In the Meshless AIO, it was pretty impressive. We thought it came together well. Indie designer, so someone who is basically working alone on it. This, however, this whole case feels like Tryx saw that. They went to the supplier, said, let me get one of what he's having, and then they just kind of shoved it into a case. And we really like a lot of the ideas here, but you'll see in the thermals that it just doesn't perform well for this ATX form factor. Other aspects of the case are interesting. The colors are unique. We liked that. The fabric front is also different. We did like how it looks and how it feels, but it's got some other issues. The case even fits a lot of drives, which is rare these days, but the front panel has 3 layers of mesh obstructing mounts for axial fans, and the Crossflow fan isn't enough to compensate for it. As an upside, we can say with a high level of confidence that this is the only computer case we've ever gotten that has an actual fucking laundry tag on it. That's right. It's got laundry instructions for the case, not for the money. That's a different one. The tag might require some revisions though. They say dry clean and tumble dry on low heat and dry flat and line dry only. I am not sure how to do all of those things only and at the same time. It's like some kind of quantum puzzle, I guess. But let's get into the review. We're not going to benchmark the laundry part. Sorry. Before that, this video is brought to you by ID Cooling and the Frozen A720 cooler. The A720 air cooler performed well in our testing last year. The A720 is a relatively high-end, dual 140mm air cooler with 7 heat pipes. We found the use of larger fans can be beneficial to acoustic performance given the thermals, although you'll want to check your case for compatibility given the taller nature of the cooler and its fans. ID Cooling uses an all-black look for its A720 and includes mounting hardware for all modern sockets. Learn more at the link in the description below. We've had some ups and downs with Tryx. Tryx is a new company. That is how you pronounce their name. I confirmed that with the people who work there. So that was the first challenge, saying the name properly. But once we got past that hurdle, their Panorama CLC, we actually liked. We had it in our best coolers for 2025 and recommended it. A lot of people did, actually. In fact, people liked the Panorama so much that everyone started copying it, the other manufacturers, and selling their own variations, like Asus, for example. The next product from Tryx was the Luca L70, which was a disappointment. Most build quality and assembly issues we've ever encountered. God. And then they responded to our review of it and tried to fix a lot of things. There are certain things they couldn't fix in that case, but they at least showed that they were willing to listen and change things. And that, it was a good sign. This case, the Flova F50, is also pretty interesting from Tryx, where they're trying to do new things. They're taking risks, which is great. It's just a question of how it plays out. So there are a couple advantages to having a Crossflow fan. First, the form factor allows it to fit in places where conventional fans can't. Second, it creates a smooth laminar flow of air, which may or may not actually matter in the context of case cooling. Third, it's interesting. We suspect that last reason is the main one behind this case's creation. But we're keeping an open mind with it, where as long as the case isn't a complete hot box, then $150 for some of the other unique features, it maybe has a place. Genuinely, the front panel was pretty interesting for both of these variations. Also interesting how they do this sort of patterned color to hide imperfections, hide dust a little bit, stuff like that. Although these panels, the fabric on cases of the past that have tried this, it will, first of all, you basically have to vacuum it. You, I guess, can launder it according to their tag for at least the front panel. But you'll have some fraying with time, which is one of the downsides of this, which leads to even more dust accumulation. Aside from the panels, though, the cases do have interesting colors. So this kind of reminds me of Height a little bit, where they're doing something different with going for more pastel or abnormal colors. That was cool to see. The materials, unfortunately, are on the flimsier side for this case, and I think you're going to start seeing this a lot more on cases coming out this year, where companies just, they don't have the money. The case companies are really struggling right now. So are the cooling companies. And I mean, just this case, like if you pick it up by this piece here, the flex on that is unbelievable. That shouldn't be happening on a steel chassis that's supported on 2 points. So I mean, this I think I could snap it out of there with my hands. And although that's not necessarily the worst thing, what we're seeing is that these companies are going thinner on the materials and the steel, drawing down some of the quality of the materials they're using a bit, and a lot of that's to try and compensate for the financial troubles they're facing, because consumers can't afford super expensive cases when they can't buy a stick of RAM. The case comes in white, black, or pink. With all colors, the fabric has a variable pattern that seems intended to disguise some of the dust buildup, which is inevitable on a fabric panel. We've seen what happens over the years to fabric on an Enthoo Pro 2, for example, and it can be hard to clean, which is a big part of the reason that fabric panels are uncommon. Fans are matched to the case color scheme, including the Crossflow Fan, which has black blades in the black model and silver blades in the others. The Crossflow Fan is unusual enough that we would have expected Tryx to buy it fully off the shelf, so having color variants and a custom housing is going above and beyond. Unfortunately, the fan is nested away where it's not really visible from the outside, so there's no real external visibility to the most interesting aspect of the case once it's built, but at least you know it's in there or something. The Crossflow Fan has 3 speed settings. There's what they call Eco, which is 1100 RPM max. Not sure if that's economy or ecological, but either way, it's the lowest RPM. Performance, which is 1800 RPM max, and Overdrive, which is 2500 RPM max. The fan accepts PWM control, so we would suggest flipping the switch to maximum and then setting a fan curve as usual to bring it down. The Meshless AIO's fan had the same exact type of speed control on it, so this may be something built in by the supplier, as the fan does seem similar. We suspect they came from the same place. The front panel has 3 layers, which creates unnecessary obstructions to airflow. It's fabric, then the structural steel grid, and then a layer of mesh behind that. The last layer of filter mesh is completely unnecessary and will harm performance even more than the fabric alone already does. In this case, really doesn't have room to make the performance worse. The fabric will do all the dust trapping that we need and is finer in its weave than the filter mesh. So the redundancy serves no purpose and is worsening the performance for something that won't even do its job better than the thing in front of it. Besides, Tryx bypassed the front panel for active airflow anyway by pulling in from the side. So it's not like the stock configuration needs much filtration there, because there's not much air going in there anyway. Tryx is exceptionally clear in the manual, website, and labels that the included air blade, as they call it, is a modification that should only be installed for liquid cooling. The logic is that the air blade directs air upwards towards the radiator at the top of the case, while removing the blade directs air front to back like normal case fans would. For this reason, the top top fan mount should be the first option for installing radiators. The Flova F50 is a fairly small case, and there's limited room for maneuvering radiators around, especially with the Crossflow fan and its side vent. With the stock setup, 120mm wide radiators installed in the front of the case will sit nearly flush with the Crossflow fan, which is another good reason to prioritize the top mount. Installing a full 360mm radiator at the top of the case may require shifting the Crossflow fan down. The front fan rails fit 120s out of the box, but they can be reconfigured to fit 140, 180, or 200mm fans. We use this feature for our standardized 140mm fans, but larger fan sizes at 180 and 200 require removing the Crossflow fan, which defeats the purpose of the case. The side fan mounts are best used with back connect motherboards, since installing fans in this location makes it harder to use the normal cable cutouts. There are also two 120mm shroud top fan mounts, one of which is blocked by the power supply. The Crossflow fan attaches to a fan rail, so technically you could move it to the top of the case, but there's no way for it to pull any air in from that location. So Tryx has the beginnings of what could be a really cool idea for modularity here, but they didn't execute on it or take advantage of it, which is going to be a trend across the case. One benefit of a narrow off-center intake fan is that it could allow greater GPU clearance. Unfortunately, it still overlaps the width of a normal card, so maximum GPU clearance is 360mm long without removing the Crossflow fan. This is another instance where Tryx had a unique advantage and then didn't use it. The fabric panel on the side of the case is weirdly annoying to remove. Two screws have to be taken out from inside the shroud first, and then you have to unwedge the panel from under the I/O unit. This is the only panel that's screwed in as well, making it feel out of place, and the fabric on the side is glued in place and may be difficult to clean, and the glue may deteriorate over time, while the front fabric has an elastic band and is removable, so it sort of feels like Tryx had two different designers on the two different panels here or something. Cable management is fine, it's nothing special, but a benefit of the side fan mount is that it makes it much easier to access connectors on the edge of the motherboard when a GPU is installed. It's odd that only two rubber cable grommets are on the already small cutouts above the motherboard, but they're mostly there to hide the unused holes if using a back connect board. There's a drive cage under the power supply shroud that can fit either 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch drives, one in a sled and one on top, as well as a plate behind the motherboard tray that could technically fit two 3.5-inch and two 2.5-inch drives at the same time, although Tryx claims only either or, not both, but both would fit. That does make the case one of the more equipped in terms of drive capabilities these days. Unfortunately, using this plate for SSDs flips them so that the SATA connector is hard to reach, which reminds us of problems from Tryx's Luca L70 case, where they're just really overlooking a lot of basic usability things here. As for the other miscellaneous items, the rear expansion slots aren't bridgeless, which may be a missed opportunity again. It would have been interesting to try an aftermarket vertical GPU kit with the Crossflow fan. Also, the single 120mm Tryx Rhoda exhaust fan is color matched to each case SKU, and we like the molded Tryx logo that flows into the shape of the frame, so a positive there. All right, so thermals and acoustics. We went pretty overboard with this case for testing just because, again, this is really interesting to me. No one does it. Normally when no one does something, there's a pretty good chance that there's a reason for that, and it's because it's not good. But every now and then, it works out really well, and then that becomes the new norm for everybody. We kind of saw that with flow-through coolers for GPUs where people were doing it, but not that much. They more often just put a backplate across the whole thing. So you always want to test the new stuff really thoroughly just to see, maybe it is a situation where they throw this in there and suddenly they've got the best cooling case on the market. That was not the case today, but we can't know that without going kind of overboard on the testing. So for testing this, we did not test with the air blade, as they call it. So that is what Tryx calls the air blade. This can mount to the Crossflow fan, and they are very clear that this is for liquid cooling only. And we test with air cooling, so we didn't use that for any of our testing, but we did a ton of other alternative tests. Those included the switch here. So we tested as sort of the default and performance mode, which is how it ships out of the box. We also tested overdrive and what they call eco mode, and then we've got all the noise levels marked for all those. Additionally, we had some tests where we took this out and we just ran two axial fans right in the front, like a more standard case. So you can just mount those here. We've marked where we had them installed at different points in the testing process, and that was one of our configurations. We also did some with the Crossflow fan in there and with axial fans next to it to see how that did, pulling air through the very obstructed front panel for some of the benchmarking. So a lot of different tests on this, and including some where we removed the dust filters, like this one, magnetic filter inside the top panel. We did some testing with that out of there. A lot of stuff to basically try and see if there's a situation where it's good. Because we really wanted to see if they had found something that no one else had found. As an unusual mid-tower, we consider the Flova F50 a competitor to the Haven BF360 Flow and the Height X50, which are both kind of unusual, although the price of fans makes the X50 significantly more expensive because you need to buy some, and the BF360 non-flow also would become more expensive. The fabric front panel looks like something from Fractal, in particular the small form factor Fabric Mood and the Ridge, but their closest mid-towers are the Meshify 3 and the North. The North is closer in spirit, but we'll use the newer Meshify 3 as our point of comparison since it offers good performance for about $140 at the time of writing, and Lian Li's cheaper $80 SUP01 fits the same category as well, but we don't have performance numbers for that one since it's basically liquid only. The advertising for the F50 makes it clear that noise levels are supposed to be an advantage of the TCF Tryx Crossflow Fan, so we're hoping for a strong start in noise normalized testing. The duty cycle percentages for the two case fans were lowered in tandem to reach the 27 dBA threshold that we have tested in our hemianechoic chamber for acoustic analysis. The Crossflow fan for that was set to performance mode. The resulting P-core average was 53 degrees Celsius above ambient, which is one of the worst results we've tested on this chart. The Crossflow fan does direct air front to back the way normal fans would, but not as effectively and not in the right location. For comparison, the BF360 averaged 45 degrees, the Meshify 3, 44, both on the opposite end of the chart. The X50 averaged 46 degrees, but that's with a set of third-party fans, since the case doesn't come with any, so your mileage may vary on that one. This case, the Flova F50, is beaten by almost every other case on the chart, unfortunately. The story is the same for noise-normalized GPU thermals. The F50 averaged 51 degrees Celsius above ambient on the GPU core and 57 on the memory, again making it one of the worst cases we've tested. The BF360 and Meshify 3 tied at 43 for the GPU, and the X50 landed at 44. In general, the Crossflow fan doesn't seem well positioned to get air through a normal flow-through GPU cooler. In contrast, both the Meshify 3 and BF360 have airflow scoops that are shaped to direct air up and through the GPU, and the X50 has a top-mounted power supply that keeps the bottom of the case open. Despite this Crossflow fan providing a curtain of air right over the GPU, it's just not enough in the right place, and it doesn't compete with anything relevant. The noise-normalized thermals weren't great, so let's try some other options and look at full-speed thermals with alternative configurations. This chart shows only the Flova configurations without competition first, we'll add them back in a second. With the fan duty cycle set to 100%, Eco Mode was predictably the worst with its 49 degrees Celsius above ambient average for the P-cores, although it also managed to be the lowest noise level at 35 dBA. Bumping the Crossflow fan up to performance mode dropped the P-cores to 48, but overdrive didn't result in any further thermal improvement while still increasing the noise level to 41 dBA. Removing the magnetic side and top filters had no effect, which makes sense when they don't have any fans directing air through them. Interestingly, removing the front panel did have a very small effect, dropping the P-cores down to 47 from the baseline of 48. Adding the two Antec fans resulted in the best temperature by far, down to 43 degrees, although that's still only the middle of the main competitive chart, and the test with the two Antec fans added and the Crossflow fan removed reveals why. That test went back to a 49 degree average, indicating that the Antec fans are having a hard time pulling air through the dense front panel. This is something Tryx is aware of, since the whole goal of the Crossflow fan is to work around the restrictive front panel material, so they created a problem and then they failed to solve it. Again, it's a good idea to remove that third layer of mesh from the front panel. Here's the full chart with other cases now. We've removed several of the less relevant Flova listings for space here. In comparison to the rest of the chart, the Meshify 3 averaged 42 degrees, the BF360 averaged 41, and the X50 averaged 40 for CPU thermals, all of which are better than any results recorded in the F50 in any configuration. For noise, cases like the Pop Air RGB and the ancient P400A Digital offer similar performance to Eco Mode, but at 31 and 30 dBA respectively. So they're quieter and they're performing about the same. The F50 loses in any comparison, especially as you factor in noise. This case is not well designed. It's like they didn't test it or something, or they didn't understand why you would use a Crossflow fan and when. The ordering of results for GPU thermals is less intuitive. Eco and performance modes are tied at 49 degrees Celsius above ambient on the GPU, although VRAM was cooler with Eco mode, and overdrive resulted in a significant GPU temperature increase up to 52 degrees. In other words, GPU performance improves the less air is moved by the Crossflow fan. The airflow patterns created by the Crossflow fan don't behave in a way that we're used to, and it seems like Tryx didn't test for flow in the case. On further inspection, this appears to be an especially complicated result of flow-through GPU coolers, the Crossflow fan, and the limited ventilation and high density of panels everywhere. So from what we're seeing, it seems as if the Crossflow fan is causing recirculation issues for the GPU. Removing the magnetic filters also worsens temperatures up to 51 degrees from the 49 degree baseline. To us, this indicates that air is having trouble getting out of the case and away from the GPU, as the pressure system created by all the impedance everywhere is limiting options for egress. And removing some of those barriers is changing the dynamic enough that we see it reflected in these results. Removing the front panel lowered temperatures in a logical manner down to 48 degrees, which is still not good, but it's a change at least. The test with the two Antec fans added performed the best for the previous CPU temperature chart, but on this GPU temperature chart, it's the worst at 52 degrees and tied with the overdrive result. Even the test with the two Antec fans installed and the Crossflow fan completely removed was better at 49 degrees. Most of these GPU results are an inversion of what might typically make sense, and that's because the air just can't get away from the GPU itself. It's sort of trapped in a bubble there. Here's the comparative chart. These are some of the worst GPU thermals in this dataset. The BF360, Meshless 3, and X50 all significantly outperformed the F50. The X50 was the worst of that group, and even it managed 43 degrees on the GPU. The Tryx Flova is just not well tested or designed thermally. It's unique, but it lacks the tuning and the effort of the Meshless AIO mini ITX case that we'd reviewed previously. We aren't going to dwell on the standardized fan test because we've already established that the Tryx case sort of sucks thermally and that Tryx is aware of the front panel restrictions and it's working around it by using side intake for the Crossflow fan, but we'll get them anyway. With two 140mm Noctua intake fans and one 120 exhaust installed according to the manual suggested placements, the peak cores averaged 50 degrees, nearly at the same level as bottom intake configurations like the Y60 and the C8 ARGB, which don't have any fans pointed at the CPU cooler. We'll also quickly show average GPU temperature, which was 55 degrees Celsius above ambient, and is the worst result we've recorded in this dataset so far. So congratulations to Tryx for doing something that no one else has managed to do since, well, the last worst result that we tested. All right, we've used our fan tester in our last two case reviews now, and we want to continue using it. We decided to just bite the bullet and start publishing information so that we can use the opportunity to learn and let the community kind of poke at the data. Although we have high enough confidence to publish numbers from the machine, like the ones that we ran with our Antec Flux Pro Noctua Edition case review, we don't yet have high enough confidence to say that you should rely on the fan test charts for purchases. These are experimental charts. The rest of our charts are published with high confidence and are known good, but for these we're still learning. For this testing, Mike on the team had to custom cut a wooden plate adapter to mount the Crossflow fan to the fan testing machine. The machine can fortunately accommodate the tall Crossflow fan diagonally, but we do have lower confidence as a result of having to custom make a plate and then secure it in place. We were able to mask it off in a way to hopefully direct the air straight into the fan testing machine. All that transparency and those disclaimers out of the way, here's what we found with our 15-section test from 40% to 100% speed in 5% increments. The Crossflow fan was extremely limited in static pressure and really needs an open surface to breathe in, as it just doesn't have the pressure performance to push past walls and obstructions. The static pressure stops at around 0.75 millimeters H2O when at zero flow, which is a low result as compared to the 1.2 millimeter H2O of our Antec 120 reverse blade fans shown now, and the 2.5 to 2.6 of the Noctua NF A12 by 25 G2s when at zero flow, also shown here. Back to the Crossflow chart, the fan is weak for pressure, partly as a result of the wide inlet and outlet. Flow maxes out at about 50 to 54 CFM at zero pressure, compared to the Antec reverse blade 120s, which did about 65 to 67 CFM at zero pressure. This is slightly lower. The flow is okay overall for a Crossflow fan though. Due to how the vortex can shift location and positioning at zero flow, at least as we understand it, we're seeing a hump in the result at zero flow before following a more standard trajectory thereafter with a few bumps in between. We think this might correlate with the overdrive results being worse than expected.
We think, although we're still learning, that this helps to explain some of the performance issues we observed with overdrive, but also just in general. Although this testing was done with performance mode, this should scale up.
Ultimately, it just seems like Tryx doesn't really understand why or when you would use one of these fans. They're not used in cases often. The only one we've ever tested with it is the Meshless AIO mini ITX case. That was pretty cool. We tried with axial fans. That specific chassis was built in a way where it really doesn't make sense with a different kind of fan because the designer for that case designed the entire case around that fan. This is the opposite. This is an ATX case. Nothing about this is unique. I don't mean that in a bad or a disparaging way. Genuinely, it's a standard format. You've got a motherboard tray where a motherboard tray goes. You have fan rails where the fan rails go. And what they did is they took a standard format and they said, how do we get this in there to try and do something different, gives us something to market, and hopefully it works out. And that's the key difference from why the Meshless AIO, where it's not the best case we've ever tested thermally, but it was pretty interesting. It was one of those like, okay, unique idea, does well enough, built around the idea. We can reward that for the creativity and for executing the actual engineering on something. Whereas that being actual engineering, this is more of sort of product engineering. It's designing something for marketing, I feel like, rather than for performance. And especially because they showed us this, well, about a year ago in late May, early June of 2025. I remember making a bunch of comments about how they could maybe make this work and make it potentially perform well. And I was like, you know, you'd have to do a lot of testing, take a long time. When are you trying to come to market? And they're like, by next year. I was like, oh, okay. Product's done. Like it's over. They're not doing any of that. So we like the idea. The different colors are nice to see. It's not a bad pink as far as shades go. And then the fabric is interesting. It's just unfortunately, the fabric's going to be god awful for dust. It's one of the worst possible materials you could use. And weirdly, you know, like the whole upside of this, when I say bad for dust, what I mean is it's going to show. But where it's good for dust is it'll capture it. So that's like the one thing that fabric does really well is that dust is not going to get in your computer. This is about as dense of a material as you can get. It's got some kind of static cling to it typically. And then they go and they shove a dust filter behind it anyway, which is like, it feels like Tryx makes these decisions all in a vacuum from each other, or there's a checklist, or where someone is going, I mean, that's not great either. I can't get it to sit flat anymore. But anyway, the review's over, so we'll leave that one for another time. But it seems like someone's going, we have this checklist of features that other cases have. We need that checklist too. And then they're just throwing them all in there anywhere, not really thinking about like, well, but us doing this different thing compensates and means we don't have to do that standard thing. And that's the way you get a unique case, is by getting rid of some of the standards where you don't need them and replacing them with things that are unique. And then hopefully it kind of comes together in something that is at least good enough. So we can't really recommend the case at this price point. It's been up and down. Right now, as we're filming this, the case is not available in the US market basically anywhere, or at least for any reasonable price. It was about $150 last time we looked it up. I don't know if it's been cheaper than that. But at that price, the Meshify 3 is superior in every possible way and is available, again, at about the same price. You don't get this, but it turns out you don't need this. And that case performs better. I guess the biggest difference is there's not this colorway for it. But if you want this kind of color, then the X50 might solve that for you. It's got some similar options. Like that's also a better case than this one. You just need to buy fans for it. So that's me for this one. Good try from Tryx. It just didn't come together for us in a way where we can recommend it. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net or patreon.com/gamersnexus to support us directly, and we'll see you all next time.